Um, so, hello everybody. It was so beautiful to be here last night and create a party with you all in ways where we naturally experience altered states and expansive states and ecstatic states. And can you imagine what it would be like if you could learn in high school about advanced brain chemistry and how to go into altered states, into ecstatic states, into really deep connection in healthy ways? Could you envision a high school like that? Yay, wonderful. So, it's interesting. We think that there's no other topic that is more interesting than substance use and where people are trying to go with it. Because when you study the brain chemistry of how drugs work, all of those chemicals are actually connected to probably the favorite human experiences, such as sexuality, connection, altered states, spiritual experiences. So we are in this for having fun. So for us, substance use is not a treacherous topic. It's actually, to me, it's the most exciting topic that I could think of. So that's why I, can't get enough of it. So Natural Highs is a program where we serve around 2,000 teens in Boulder, and we've done this for 15 years. The program is run with kids, so kids run the program themselves. I get to be along for the ride. And because of that, the program is really very, very creative. Kids come up with beautiful things. So we do sober raves, we do open mics, we do an after-school drop-in program, we do workshops. And our workshops are probably not looking like what you envision a drug program looks like. So we work with very interesting things. We work with pretty advanced brain chemistry. We work with herbs. We work with ritual. We work with trance dancing. So probably things that you don't typically expect. We know that when we give young people opportunities to be leaders, that young people come up with amazing things. We just started a record label, so you can check out our music. And we host lots and lots of events in this town where people can understand that you don't need to copy your own neurochemistry, that we have a lot of our beautiful own neurotransmitters going, that drugs, when I say drugs, I mean things like alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, heroin, that drugs just copy. Most people don't know that we have all of our beautiful neurotransmitters available at our fingertips all the time, but unfortunately, most of us, both kids and adults, we don't learn how to actually do that. So, let me see where I want to go next. So I'm thinking it might be a good thing to show you a little bit of the inside of our program so that you can see and get a little bit of a flavor of how that looks like, what we do. Yeah, we have a thing that lots of our kids get tattoos, Natural Highs tattoos. I always feel conflicted how their parents feel about that. So check it out.
The Natural Highs program is a community built off the youth leaders and the youth who participate in it.
Brain chemistry is sort of the foundation of Natural Highs.
We talk about feelings, natural highs, and habits and rituals.
So we hear a lot from kids who participate in our programs that they have never received any of this information, not in schools, not in any other programs. And certainly not in drug prevention programs. And so we'd like to bring the information that we think would make a difference to people at the age where they need it the most.
I think a lot of people would quit drugs if they knew what Natural Highs taught. I think a big part of that is that Natural Highs teaches you how to feel good on your own without the use of substance, and I feel that once people know that, they make the switch.
Have you ever seen a drug prevention program looking like this? Yeah. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I got interested in this topic so that you understand where this is all coming from. So when I was a young person growing up in Germany, 2 of my friends died in connection with their drug use. And as a young person, this was a very, very difficult experience for me because these people, of course, did not fit the stereotype of, an addict or a junkie. They were amazing people. They were very creative, very spiritual people, very amazing people. And so as a young person, for me, that left me mostly furious that nobody stepped in, that nobody supported them, and that most of all, nobody understood what was going on, and that somebody could, not know how to live their craving, their desires, their drivenness without literally killing themselves. So as a young person, I was determined to figure this out, to learn everything I could in understanding these kinds of forces inside of ourselves. And so I literally started, reading every book, studying at universities, traveling to different countries. And the interesting thing was that it didn't matter how many books I read, how many courses I did, I really didn't get any answers in terms of what is this inner force. And I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, where you have a craving that in the middle of the night you go out into the cold, through the snow to get a pack of cigarettes. I mean, I was just watching myself. I'm like, what is driving us to this degree? And I was very lucky as a young person. I had also another interest. I was very interested in dance. And I was very interested, and I stumbled really across these forms of dance that are not about performing, but where you actually close your eyes and you use your own body, your movement, your breath, the way you pay attention to go into altered states. So we would be in dance studios, dance workshops, we would blindfold ourselves, and we would do crazy things, And interestingly enough, it was in those places where I suddenly felt I start to understand this force inside of me. I understand where this craving, that it actually wants to go somewhere. And so it was very, very, here I was in these 2 worlds. Here on the one side trying to understand how to work with substance abuse. And then here on the other hand, in the dance studio, having these experiences of like, wait a second, how do I get to be so privileged, having a space to unravel that? And, kids in high school don't have that experience. So I started experimenting with that and bringing trance dancing into high schools and bringing meditation into high schools. And it was interesting. The whole journey, the whole quest brought me here to the US, brought me to Boulder specifically, to study with a pioneer in somatic psychology, Christine Caldwell, who specialized in finding more innovative, more creative approaches to work with addiction and to work with these forces inside of us. So for me as a foreigner, living in the US, I immediately got involved in traditional treatment environments. So I worked here in the Boulder County Jail, I worked here in psychiatric programs, I worked in the detox, and I was just blown away how people in this country get treated when they get in trouble with drugs and alcohol. I couldn't believe it. What's happening here, that people get punished, that people get thrown into a system that makes the whole situation so much, much, much worse. And I tried for a long time within these systems to make a difference. And at some point, out of total desperation, I started asking people. I said, so what is it that you are actually looking for? What is it that would actually help you? And the interesting thing is that the answers that we heard were very, very surprising. And I didn't really find a lot of traditional substance use treatment addressing these issues. So first of all, what we heard was that a lot of people get addicted to substances that they don't even like the chemical effect of them very much. A lot of people get addicted to alcohol or marijuana or cocaine even, and they don't specifically like the particular chemical effect. But people get really hooked into the social aspect of substance use. And so what we learned is that it is very, very difficult to ask people to stay away from a substance that was their way to connect with their friends. I mean, can you imagine that for suddenly somebody tells you the way you connect with your friends is not okay anymore? that's not good for human beings. We're very, very vulnerable socially, and so that's not a good strategy to try to help people. So we are so lucky and happy that we found a social ritual that comes from South America. It's called sharing the yerba mate, where people actually do a very, very beautiful, similar gesture to what people do here in this country, in this town, passing something in a circle of friends. Now, the interesting thing is that this herb that we use in the yerba mate ritual is actually good for you. It's like when you think about that, why would we in our culture, we think of ourselves so advanced, so being so advanced in the US. We think of ourselves in Boulder being so advanced. Why would we celebrate all the most important moments of our lives and in the lives of our family and friends with substances that are really not that great for us? Like, why would we do that, right? It's not very smart. And so we use a ritual that is exactly the same gesture of connecting and feels so good. And it actually works about the opposite of how drugs and alcohol work in your brain. And if you're curious about that, we're going to do a workshop here in a moment where you can learn exactly, like, how can an herb like the yerba mate work so opposite to how alcohol, how marijuana, how cocaine works in the brain. So we think that that's a very nice way of celebrating, is to actually share something with each other that's actually good for us. The other thing that we learned is that there is a tremendous intelligence underneath the desire if we are drawn to a particular substance. So, I get calls every week of parents desperate, people desperate. You wouldn't believe what I found in my daughter's bedroom. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I do believe, because I know what's going on in Boulder. We have an epidemic, heroin epidemic in high schools in Boulder. And people are very surprised when I say, look, there is an intelligence behind you being drawn to a particular substance. If you are drawn to a substance like marijuana, if you are drawn to a substance like heroin, there's actually an intelligence. And if you study the brain chemistry of this substance, you would learn so much about yourself. And once you know this about yourself, you could actually use that and go there, but this time for real, not with a substitute, but actually for yourself, learning about how to work with your own being to get there. So I was very, very curious by this force in people that we call craving, that literally drives people sometimes to the edge of utter destructiveness. So I was so interested in that at some point I said, I want to study this, because there's no literature about it. So at some point I did a master's thesis on craving, and I looked at 600 studies that were done on craving within 5 years. 599 looked at external factors, like measurable factors, right? Like skin conductivity and heart rate and things like that. One of them, one of 600, looked at the internal experience of craving. I tried to track down this researcher, I couldn't find her. So it was very interesting to me. So I invited people who suffered intensely from craving, who were tortured by craving. And it didn't matter whether it was towards heroin, or whether it was towards food, or whether it was towards sex, or whatever it was. It didn't matter at all. The criteria was that you had to be tortured by craving. And then what we did is we studied this as a phenomenon. We said, okay, if you don't quiet your craving, if you don't push it down with a substance or a behavior, what would it do? Like, where would it go? And so what we did is we started to dance with it. We started to paint with it. We started to trance dance with it. And what we found was really, really incredible, which was that if people trust the energy of their craving and would follow it, it would bring them to the most unbelievable places. I mean, I cannot even tell you. Places of the most excruciating loss and grief, places that are, not even in people's own biography, but that were pointing towards their birth and the time before their birth, and material that really looked like past life material. I mean, like wild things. And it was very interesting that one of the participants, he said at the end, he said, you know, it's interesting, my craving used to be my enemy, and now it turned into being my lover. And this is why we keep doing this, because if you want to know what's really underneath your desire to alter your state, and if you go there for real, you're gonna find a treasure. And we don't say to people, don't do drugs because we think drugs are bad or anything like that. We say to people, don't settle for the substitute. Don't make a compromise. Go towards those places that you have a craving for, that you have a desire for. Go towards them for real and see what's waiting there for you. Because you will experience more blissful states than you can ever experience with a drug. Now, the interesting thing is that in this country right now, you can imagine, right, we're way outside the box, and all of the experiences we're talking about are really kind of still taboo in our culture. You know, when we talk about altered states, spiritual experiences, expansive states, sexuality, deep connection, all of those experiences, you know, are not on a high school curriculum typically and are not getting taught. So what we're noticing is that even though our program is extremely successful, so when we do feedback, over 85% of all workshop participants in Natural Highs, over 85% of the teens who go through our program say at the end that they either quit doing substances or that they reduce their drug use. Over 85%. That is unheard of in terms of success, right? Now, we don't get any funding, any regular funding, because we are not part of the federal government's registry for substance abuse prevention programs. Because when you look at these programs, of course, they don't do things like we do, right? So if you want to be part of and connect with us and be part of our community, and if you want to support young people organizing and doing a grassroots movement, you know, our kids call this a revolution. If you want to support young people, please connect with us. You can find us on naturalhighs.org. We're going to start a Patreon campaign soon where we invite a community around us to support us in unusual ways so that we can keep teaching what we do and so that young people can really create the culture that they want to live in. Thank you very much.